Welcome to my channel, The World of Science Fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.
Blood soaked the sleeve of Ben Carter's uniform, sticky and hot against his skin. The gash along his side burned like liquid fire, each labored breath sending fresh waves of agony through his body. The mission had gone to hell faster than anyone expected. He'd stayed behind to drag a wounded villager out of the raiders' crossfire. That moment of hesitation had cost him dearly. Plasma fire snapped and hissed through the alien forest behind him, illuminating the violet moss in strobing bursts of unnatural light. His staggered footsteps left a crimson trail across the phosphorescent ground cover, marking his desperate retreat like a beacon. The raiders would follow it straight to him if he didn't find shelter soon. Ben's vision swam, dark spots dancing at the edges. The medical kit in his pack was depleted, used on others in the settlement before the attack. His training told him what the blood loss meant. 20 minutes, maybe less, before he'd lose consciousness. After that, he stumbled over an exposed root, his weakened legs giving way beneath him. Instead of hitting solid ground, he felt himself tumbling, sliding down into a hidden crevice. Slick stone rushed past as darkness swallowed him whole. His shoulder slammed against something hard, sending a fresh bolt of pain through his body before he finally came to rest on cold, damp earth. Silence. Only the rasp of his own breathing and the gentle plink of water dripping from the cave ceiling punctuated the sudden quiet. The sounds of battle had vanished, replaced by the eerie stillness of this underground sanctuary, or tomb. Ben forced his eyes to adjust to the gloom. In the center of the cave, caught in a single shaft of moonlight, filtering through a crack in the ceiling, lay a pool of shimmering water. The liquid seemed to pulse with a subtle luminescence, rippling though there was no breeze to disturb its surface. Desperation drove him forward. He crawled toward it, shoving himself across the rough stone with his good arm, leaving a smear of crimson in his wake. The pool beckoned, promising relief from the fire in his side. When he reached its edge, he plunged his hand into the icy water and scooped it to his parched lips. One gulp, two. A strange metallic taste coated his tongue, like copper and something else, something alien. But he didn't care. His body cried out for hydration, for anything that might help him survive. The pain ebbed almost immediately. His ragged breathing eased, the desperate struggle for air gradually subsiding. Tentatively, Ben touched his wound, expecting to find the ragged gash still weeping blood. Instead, his fingers encountered something impossible. Flesh knitting together beneath his hand, the torn edges pulling shut as if being stitched by invisible sutures, until only a pale scar remained. "You are healed." The voice, cold as tempered steel, rang from the shadows. Ben spun around, nearly losing his balance as he scrambled to his feet. His hand instinctively reached for the sidearm that wasn't there, lost somewhere in the forest during his desperate flight. A blue-skinned woman stepped into the shaft of moonlight, her movements fluid and predatory. A white braid hung down her back, contrasting sharply with skin the color of a clear winter sky. Her eyes were like dark amethysts, hard and unreadable in the dim light. In her hand she held a jagged blade, its edge gleaming as she aimed it steadily at his chest. Her boots were caked with dirt and violet moss, a torn bandage stained with indigo blood. Her blood, Ben realized, wrapped around her shoulder. She was a warrior, that much was clear from her stance and the way she held the weapon with practiced ease. She nodded toward the pale scar on his side, visible through the torn fabric of his uniform. "Now you owe," she said, her voice emotionless. "The mountain never gives freely." Ben's hand remained pressed against his side, mind racing to make sense of what had happened. "I don't understand. What is this place?" The warrior's expression didn't change. "The source. Life for life. Balance must be maintained. Look, I appreciate the help, but I need to get back to my team." Ben glanced toward the crevice he'd fallen through. "There are people dying up there." "You were dying." She stepped closer, blade unwavering. "Now you live because others will not." A chill ran through Ben that had nothing to do with the cave's damp air. "What are you talking about?" "What others?" "The price is paid in blood. Always." She gestured with her free hand toward the exit. "Come, the elders will decide your service." "Service?" Ben tensed, assessing the distance to the crevice, calculating his chances. "I'm not serving anyone. I'm a doctor. I help people. That's my job. A flicker of something, surprise perhaps, crossed her face at the word doctor, but it vanished quickly behind that impassive mask. Then help our people, healer. Or refuse and die here. She angled her blade, catching the moonlight. Your choice. Now. The warrior, she called herself Mira, marched Ben through winding tunnels that gradually sloped upward. His training as a military medic kept his mind cataloging details. The strange phosphorescence of certain rocks, the consistent temperature, the occasional scratch marks on the walls that looked unsettlingly like tallies. They emerged onto a narrow path cut into the mountainside. Below, the alien forest stretched like a violet sea, broken only by the distant flickers of plasma fire. The raiders were still out there, still hunting. Your people, Mira said, noting his gaze, bring weapons we cannot match. They steal our children for their minds. They burn what we build. Those aren't my people, Ben countered, the night air cool against his skin after the warmth of the cave. I came here to help. My team's mission was medical aid, nothing more. Mira's laugh was harsh, disbelieving. Your uniform says otherwise. Before Ben could respond, she pushed him forward along the path. It wound higher up the mountainside, eventually revealing a settlement carved directly into the stone. What had looked like natural formations from a distance were actually dwellings, homes and communal spaces sculpted from the living rock. The settlement appeared primitive at first glance, but Ben noticed sophisticated irrigation channels and ventilation shafts. These people weren't primitives. They were survivors adapting to harsh conditions with ingenuity and determination. Carved into the stone, the settlement looked primitive, but enduring. The warrior, her name was Mira, shoved Ben before the elder's hut. Inside, the chieftain lay gasping on furs, chest rattling, skin clammy blue. Around him, the sick moaned. You drank from the source, Mira hissed, shoving him toward her dying father. Now you must serve. Serve! Ben pulled back, squaring his shoulders. I'm a doctor, not a slave. Mira's eyes flashed. The source takes life to give life. Balance must be maintained. That's barbaric, Ben countered. Where I come from, we heal without demanding blood payment. Where you come from, Mira stepped closer, her face inches from his. You have the luxury of machines and medicines. Here we have only the source and its law. An elder limped forward. Each healed becomes a debtor. You live because others will die. That is our way since the stars were young. I never agreed to that bargain, Ben shot back. The elder's laugh was brittle. The mountain doesn't ask permission, off-worlder. The villagers pressed closer, forming a tightening circle. One spat at Ben's feet, the glob landing with deliberate precision. You stole life from the source, a woman snarled. Her child clutched protectively to her chest. How many of ours will you surrender to pay for it? I don't surrender lives, Ben's voice rose. I save them. That's what healing means. Pretty words, Mira scoffed, though something flickered in her eyes. Empty air. She grabbed his arm, fingers digging painfully into muscle, and yanked him toward the chieftain's bedside. Her father's breathing had grown more labored, his skin taking on an ashen quality that Ben recognized all too well. Prove your words, then, Mira challenged, her voice dropping dangerously low. Save him. If your way is better, let him rise. I need my medical kit, Ben said, resolve hardening in his voice. It was in my pack when I fell. Mira barked an order, and two young warriors darted out. They returned minutes later with his torn backpack, miraculously intact despite the fall. Ben immediately knelt beside the chieftain, his fingers pressing against the blue-skinned neck, feeling for the pulse. Weak, thready, but present. I'll need space, he said, authority returning to his voice, and clean water, not from your source, boiled water. The villagers exchanged glances, but Mira nodded curtly. Do as he says. Ben worked without rest. He boiled water over fire, sterilized his tools, brewed tinctures from local herbs with antiseptic sting. His hands never stopped moving. Mira watched, arms folded, doubt giving way to wary respect. He was no miracle worker. He fought. At dawn, the chieftain's breath faltered, becoming ragged and shallow. The elders gathered closer. Mira's eyes never left her father's face, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of his pallet. Do something, she commanded, a crack appearing in her stoic facade. Ben's fingers pressed against the chieftain's neck, searching for a pulse that grew weaker with each passing second. I'm trying everything I can. Try harder. Mira's voice broke, the sound raw with desperation. The chieftain convulsed suddenly, back arching. Then stillness. Complete, terrible stillness. No, Mira whispered, then louder. No! She lunged forward, seizing her father's shoulders, shaking him as if force alone could return life. Father! Father, breathe! Ben tried to pull her back. Mira, he's gone, she whirled on him, striking his hands away with violence that sent him staggering. You failed! Your methods are worthless! Her voice rose to a near scream, echoing off stone walls. The source would have saved him. At what cost? Ben shot back, refusing to retreat. Whose life would you sacrifice? Mine! The word exploded from her, shocking the gathered elders into silence. I would have given mine. The admission hung in the air between them. Mira's chest heaved, her composure shattered. She turned back to her father's body, fingers trembling as they touched his still warm face. Ben sat slumped beside the corpse, beaten. His methods had bought hours, not salvation. Around them the clan murmured bitterly. See? The foreigner's way is weakness. Mira's jaw clenched, rage flashing. But then she saw his trembling hands, the exhaustion, the tears he refused to let fall. Something shifted in her expression. She grabbed a bowl of water, hurled it against the wall where it shattered, the sound like thunder in the confined space. Then, unexpectedly, she stepped closer and placed her palm silently on his shoulder. Their eyes met. Grief against grief. From his pack, Ben drew his last sterile bandage. White, soft, clean. A fragment of another world. He unfolded it with precise movements, revealing antiseptic-infused fibers, woven in patterns their world had never seen. For the others, he whispered, pressing it into her palm. With this, you can stop infections before they start. Cut it into strips. Each piece can save a life. Mira's fingers closed around it, feeling the strange fabric hum with potential. Her eyes widened slightly as understanding dawned. Not just cloth, but power. A different kind of power than the source, but no less real. This tiny thing, she asked, voice low with disbelief. This tiny thing, Ben confirmed, has saved more soldiers on battlefields than all your source water. She held it, testing its weight, the burden of intent. Something cracked in her. The first wall fell. Days passed. Together they fought the plague. Fewer died. Children began to recover. For the first time, laughter echoed faintly in the camp. That night, Ben and Mira shared a bowl of stew by the fire. He broke a hard crust of bread from his ration pack and offered half. She hesitated, then accepted. The first time she had taken food from his hand. Your medicines work slowly, she admitted, but they work. Most healing does take time, Ben replied. Quick fixes usually come with costs. Mira's laugh surprised them both. A sound like water over stones, rusty from disuse but genuine. It transformed her face completely, years falling away in an instant. The door exploded inward. The raiders stormed in, weapons gleaming. 5 of them. They demanded medicine. The fight was brutal. Ben struck with surgical precision, aiming for joints and nerves. Mira fought with raw fury, blades whirling, but they were outnumbered. One raider lunged at the children's cots. Ben hurled himself between them. The blade punched deep into his gut. Agony flared white. He collapsed, vision swimming. The last thing he saw was Mira's face. Not steel now, but terror. Mira dragged Ben's limp body back through the caverns, his blood dark on the stone. She laid him at the water's edge. Her face was rigid with grief. She knew his creed. He would rather die free than live as a debtor. But she could not let him go. She forced his mouth open, poured the source down his throat. The wound closed. His chest rose. The pale scar marked him. Debtor, slave to her people's law. Tears streaked her face. She looked at her own bloodied hand, cut open in the fight. Slowly, deliberately, she lifted water to her lips, her wound sealed in an instant. Gasps rose. Behind her, half the village had gathered, following her into the cavern. They saw. They knew. Ben's eyes opened. He saw his healed scar, then hers. Wordlessly, Mira unfolded the white bandage he had given her. With ritual precision, She wrapped it around her freshly healed hand, a false wound over a vanished one. She turned to the watching clan. "From this day," her voice rang, "I too am a debtor. His fate is mine." The white bandage gleamed in the source's ethereal light, a stark symbol against her blue skin. "Now we pay together." Silence. Then whispers. A law broken. A bond forged. Ben stared at her, horror and awe warring in his gaze. She met his eyes with iron resolve. The clan's reaction was immediate and divided. Some backed away in fear, as if the debt might somehow be contagious. Others pressed forward, voices raised in outrage at the broken tradition. A few, mostly those Ben had treated, stood silently, uncertainty etched on their blue faces. "The law is absolute," an elder croaked, pointing a gnarled finger at Mira. "No warrior drinks from the source without need. No healer breaks the balance." "I needed," Mira responded, her voice steady despite the tension radiating from her body. "I needed him to live." The confession hung in the air, naked and vulnerable. Ben felt something shift inside his chest, a tightness he hadn't realized was there loosening slightly. "The debt remains," another voice called. "Two debtors now instead of one. Double the price to pay." Mira helped Ben to his feet, her hand firm under his elbow. The white bandage around her palm stood out starkly against her blue skin, a deliberate mark of solidarity. "We'll pay it," she said, looking not at the clan but at Ben. Together, but on different terms. They emerged from the cavern into harsh daylight. The settlement looked different to Ben now, not just primitive dwellings carved from stone, but a community balanced on the knife edge of survival. His medical training had taught him to see systems, and this was one he was only beginning to understand. "Your clan will never accept this," he said quietly as they walked back toward the infirmary. "Breaking your most sacred law, they'll exile you at best." Mira's laugh was bitter. "Perhaps. But they need me too much to act hastily. And now they need you. Because I'm a debtor? Because you're a healer." She stopped, turning to face him fully. A real one. Not just someone who uses the source to transfer death from one body to another. Ben studied her face, seeing it clearly for the first time. The harshness was still there. Life had carved it into her features, but beneath it lay something else. Hope, perhaps, or the desperate need for it. "Why did you do it?" he asked. "Why make yourself a debtor?" Her eyes met his, unflinching. "Because your way might be better. Because someone had to stand with you to make them see." The infirmary was in disarray after the raiders' attack. Ben and Mira worked silently side by side, straightening cots, gathering what medicines remained, checking on patients. The children watched them with wide, solemn eyes, old enough to understand that something fundamental had changed. "The raiders will return," Mira said as they finished. "They always do once they find a target." "My team will be searching for me," Ben countered, though without much conviction. Standard protocol after a separation was to maintain position for 48 hours, then withdraw to the rendezvous point. It had been far longer than that. "And if they find you?" Mira asked, her voice carefully neutral. "Will you leave?" The question carried weight beyond its simple words. Ben thought of the source, of the pale scar on his abdomen, of the debt he supposedly owed, of the white bandage around Mira's hand. "I took an oath," he said finally, "to heal, to help. That doesn't change, whether I'm here or elsewhere." Something like relief flickered across her face, quickly hidden. "Good. Because I have an idea." Mira's plan was audacious. Use the source, but differently. Take just enough to heal critical wounds, then use Ben's medicine for the rest. Balance both approaches, minimizing the debt while maximizing survival. "The elders will never agree," Ben pointed out as they huddled by the fire that night, sketching crude diagrams in the dirt. "Your whole society is built around the source's power and its price. Some will listen," Mira insisted. "Those who have seen your methods work. Those who are tired of losing loved ones to balance the scales." Her confidence was infectious, but Ben remained skeptical. "Even if they agree, there's still the matter of our own debts. According to your law, we both owe lives now." Mira's expression darkened. "Yes, and there will be those who demand payment in the traditional way." "Which is?" She hesitated, then sighed. Sacrifice. A life given to the source for each life taken from it. Ben's blood ran cold. Human sacrifice? That's barbaric. It's survival, Mira snapped, then visibly reined in her anger. Or it was, when we had nothing else. When the source was our only defense against extinction. Before Ben could respond, a commotion outside drew their attention. Voices raised in alarm. The pounding of feet on stone. Mira was on her feet instantly, blade in hand. Ben followed her to the entrance of the infirmary. Outside, chaos reigned. Villagers pointed toward the sky, faces twisted in fear. Ben followed their gaze and felt his stomach drop. A military transport ship descended through the atmosphere, its engines leaving burning trails against the darkening sky. Your people? Mira asked tightly. Ben shook his head slowly. Not mine. That's a consortium vessel. Mercenaries, probably hired by the mining corporation. They come for the mountain, Mira whispered, understanding dawning in her eyes. For the source. The realization hit Ben like a physical blow. The healing properties of the source? If the corporation discovered that, they would strip mine the entire mountain to extract it. The village, the forest, everything would be destroyed in their pursuit of profit. We need to warn them off, Ben said urgently. Make them think there's nothing of value here. Mira's laugh was hollow. They've already decided there's value, off-worlder. Words won't change their minds. She was right, of course. The consortium didn't negotiate. They took. Ben had seen the aftermath of their operations on other frontier worlds. Ecological devastation, indigenous populations displaced or worse. Then we fight, he said grimly. Mira eyed him with surprise. You would stand with us against your own kind. They're not my kind, Ben replied, echoing her words from days earlier. I'm a healer. They're destroyers. For the first time since he'd met her, Mira smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her face completely. Then perhaps you're becoming one of us, after all. The village council gathered hastily, voices competing as strategies were proposed and rejected. The elders advocated hiding in the deep caverns, waiting for the off-worlders to leave. The younger warriors called for immediate attack. Neither approach seemed likely to succeed against the consortium's superior firepower. We can't fight them directly, Ben interjected during a momentary lull. But we might be able to convince them this place isn't worth the trouble. All eyes turned to him, some hostile, others merely wary. The elder's suspicion had only deepened since his second healing by the source, despite the lives he'd saved in the infirmary. The consortium wants resources, not conflict, he continued. If we can make extraction too costly or too dangerous, they have weapons that could level this mountain, an elder pointed out. What could possibly deter them? Ben hesitated, mind racing. Disease, he said finally. A contagion they can't control. Something that would make any mining operation impossible. Murmurs rippled through the gathering. Mira stepped forward, standing beside him in a clear show of support. The plague that's been killing us, she said. We could use it against them. Not exactly, Ben clarified quickly. We'd create the appearance of contagion. Make them believe the area is too dangerous to occupy. It was a desperate plan, relying on deception rather than force, but it was the only one that offered even a slim chance of success. Gradually, the council warmed to the idea, adding refinements, identifying weak points in the consortium's likely approach. As they dispersed to prepare, Mira pulled Ben aside. This may not work, she said quietly, and if it fails, they will take the source. All that we are will be lost. The weight of her words hung between them. Ben thought of the pale scar on his abdomen, of the lives saved in the infirmary, of Mira's choice to stand with him against her people's traditions. Then we make sure it doesn't fail, he replied, his voice steady despite the fear coiling in his gut. They worked through the night, preparing their deception. Ben synthesized a harmless but visually alarming compound from local flora, one that would produce symptoms mimicking a deadly contagion. Rashes, swollen glands, bloody discharge, all frightening, none actually dangerous. Mira organized the warriors, positioning them to create the illusion of a larger force than they actually possessed. The children and elders were hidden deep in the cavern system, along with their most precious cultural artifacts. The consortium landed at dawn, a surgical strike team emerging from the transport ship with weapons drawn. They moved with the practiced efficiency of experienced mercenaries, securing a perimeter before advancing toward the settlement. Now, Mira whispered. The first phase of their plan unfolded. Warriors staggered into view, their blue skin marred with the artificial symptoms Ben had created. They collapsed dramatically, convulsing, spitting the red fluid he had prepared. Others dragged them away, their own hands and faces smeared with the same alarming substances. The mercenaries hesitated, clearly unsettled by the display. Their leader barked orders, and they adjusted their breathing apparatus, tightening seals against potential contagion. They're cautious, Ben observed from their hidden position. That's good. Now for phase 2, Mira signaled to her warriors. They retreated further into the settlement, leaving behind carefully prepared evidence of a devastating outbreak. Bodies wrapped in blood-stained shrouds, dwellings marked with quarantine symbols Ben had taught them, the scattered remnants of failed medical interventions. The mercenaries advanced slowly, scanning the abandoned areas with increasing unease. Their leader consulted a handheld device, presumably communicating with the ship. Ben held his breath. If they called for hazmat equipment, if they decided to investigate more thoroughly, one mercenary removed his breathing apparatus to adjust it. In that moment, a hidden warrior released a cloud of Ben's synthesized irritant. The mercenary inhaled, then doubled over, coughing violently. When he straightened, blood, actually a harmless dye, trickled from his nose and mouth. Panic erupted among the consortium forces. The infected mercenary was restrained, his colleagues backing away in alarm. Their leader shouted orders, gesturing frantically toward the ship. They're retreating, Mira whispered, disbelief coloring her voice. It's working. Ben didn't reply, watching intently as the mercenaries dragged their contaminated comrade back toward the transport. It seemed too easy, too quick a victory. His suspicion proved justified. As the last mercenary reached the ship's ramp, their leader turned back toward the settlement. He raised his weapon and fired, not at any person, but at the mountainside itself. The explosion rocked the ground beneath them. Rock shattered, a gaping wound opening in the stone face. The leader fired again and again, methodically targeting the mountain rather than the dwellings. They're looking for mining access points, Ben realized aloud. Testing the mineral composition. Mira's face drained of color. The source cavern, if they breach it. Another explosion, closer this time. The ground trembled. From deep within the mountain came a sound like a great beast awakening, a rumble that grew to a roar. The tunnels are collapsing, Mira gasped, already running toward the cavern entrance. The children, the elders, they're trapped inside. Ben raced after her, heart pounding in his chest. The settlement dissolved into chaos around them. Warriors abandoning their positions as the mountain itself seemed to come alive with shifting stone and cascading debris. They reached the main cavern entrance to find it partially blocked by fallen rock. Mira didn't hesitate, squeezing through the narrow opening without regard for the sharp edges that tore at her clothing and skin. Mira, wait, Ben called, but she was already gone, swallowed by the darkness beyond. He forced himself through the gap, ignoring the burning scrape of stone against his freshly healed wound. Inside, dust hung thick in the air, choking him with every breath. He pulled a cloth from his pocket, covering his mouth and nose as he pressed forward. The tunnel forked ahead. From the left branch came the sound of voices, frightened, angry, alive. From the right, only ominous silence. Ben knew without being told that the right path led to the source. Another explosion shook the mountain. Small stones rained down from the ceiling. The mercenaries were still firing, still probing for weakness. Time was running out. Ben turned left, following the voices. He found the villagers huddled in a larger chamber, the children wide-eyed with terror, the elders muttering prayers or curses. Several were injured, crushed by falling debris or cut by sharp stone. He moved among them automatically, medical training taking over as he assessed wounds, prioritized treatment, offered what comfort he could with limited supplies. But his eyes kept searching the gathered faces, looking for one in particular. "Where is Mira?" he asked finally, addressing an elder whose arm he had just splinted. The old woman's gaze shifted toward the tunnel entrance. She went to the source, to protect it. Of course she had. Ben finished securing the bandage, then straightened. "I need to find her. These people need to get out before the whole system collapses." "The warriors will lead them," the elder replied, nodding toward the blue-skinned fighters already organizing an evacuation. "Go. Find our daughter." Ben didn't waste time questioning the possessive term. He hurried back through the tunnel, taking the right fork this time. The path descended steeply, winding deeper into the mountain's heart. The rumbling grew louder as he progressed, punctuated by sharp cracks as stone fractured under pressure. Dust filled his lungs despite the cloth over his face. His eyes watered, vision blurring. He found her at the edge of the source pool. The cavern had changed. Cracks zigzagged across the ceiling. Chunks of rock had fallen into the glowing water. Mira stood with her back to him, blade drawn, facing 3 consortium mercenaries who had somehow found their own way in. "This is what you came for," she was saying, her voice steady despite the weapon aimed at her chest. "But you cannot have it." The lead mercenary laughed, the sound distorted by his breathing apparatus. "Stand aside, native. Corporate wants samples, and corporate gets what it wants." "Not this time," Mira replied, shifting her stance slightly. That's when Ben saw what she intended. Her blade wasn't pointed at the mercenaries, but at the cavern wall beside the pool, at a spot where the stone had already begun to crack under the bombardment from outside. She meant to collapse the cavern completely, to bury the source rather than let it fall into consortium hands, to bury herself with it. "Mira, don't!" Ben's shout echoed through the cavern. All eyes turned to him. The mercenaries raised their weapons, but Mira used the moment of distraction to strike. Her blade plunged into the fractured stone with surprising force, widening the crack, sending a spiderweb of fissures racing across the cavern wall. The lead mercenary fired. The energy bolt caught Mira in the shoulder, spinning her around. She staggered back, falling to one knee at the edge of the pool. Blood, her real blood, indigo and thick, spilled down her arm, dripping into the source. The water reacted instantly, its glow intensifying where her blood touched it. The mercenaries hesitated, momentarily transfixed by the phenomenon. Ben used that hesitation. He charged forward, tackling the nearest mercenary. They crashed to the ground, the man's weapon skittering across the stone floor. The other 2 turned their weapons on him, but the confined space made a clear shot impossible with their comrade in the way. "Run!" Ben shouted to Mira as he grappled with the mercenary. "Get out of here!" But Mira wasn't listening. Despite her wounds, she lurched to her feet and drove her blade into another crack in the cavern wall. Stone groaned in protest. Dust and small rocks showered down from the ceiling. "What are you doing?" was the lead mercenary demanded, backing away from the increasingly unstable walls. "You'll kill us all." "If necessary," Mira replied, her voice strained with pain, but unwavering in resolve. The second mercenary panicked, firing wildly. Energy bolts ricocheted off stone, one striking the ceiling directly above the source. A massive chunk of rock broke free, plummeting toward the glowing pool. Ben threw himself clear of his opponent just as the rock crashed into the source. Water exploded upward, glittering droplets hanging suspended for an impossible moment before raining down on them all. The cavern trembled, more cracks appearing in walls and ceiling. "Fall back," the lead mercenary ordered, already retreating toward the tunnel entrance. "Priority shift. Extract immediately." His subordinates didn't need to be told twice. They scrambled after him, abandoning their confrontation in favor of escape. Within seconds, they had vanished into the tunnel. Ben rushed to Mira's side. Her shoulder wound was serious. The energy bolt had burned through muscle and possibly damaged bone. She sagged against him, strength ebbing with her blood. "We need to get out," he urged, supporting her weight as he guided her toward the exit. "This whole system is coming down." "No," she resisted, pulling back toward the source. "I have to finish it. Have to destroy it." "Mira, please," Ben begged. "It's not worth your life." Her eyes met his, fierce despite the pain clouding them. "It's worth all our lives. If they take it, if they learn its secrets, they'll drain every living thing on this planet to replicate it." She was right, and Ben knew it. The consortium would exploit the source without mercy or restraint, regardless of the cost to the indigenous population. He'd seen it happen on other worlds, but he couldn't let her die for it. "Then we destroy it together," he said, coming to a decision, "and we both get out alive." From his medkit, he extracted a small vial, a powerful acid used for cauterizing certain types of wounds. This should contaminate the source beyond any possibility of useful samples. Understanding dawned in Mira's eyes. She nodded once, leaning more heavily against him as her strength continued to fade. Ben approached the pool, now partially filled with fallen rock. The water still glowed, though less intensely than before. He hesitated, remembering how it had saved his life, twice. What other secrets might it hold? What potential benefits to medicine might be lost if he destroyed it? But the alternative was worse, much worse. He uncapped the vial and poured its contents into the source. The reaction was immediate and violent. The water hissed and bubbled, its glow changing from ethereal blue to sickly green. The acrid smell of chemical degradation filled the air. "It's done," he said, turning back to Mira. "Now we leave." The mountain had other ideas. Another explosion, closer this time, likely targeting a different section of the settlement, sent shock waves through the cavern. The already weakened ceiling began to collapse in earnest. Ben grabbed Mira, half carrying her toward the tunnel as chunks of stone crashed down around them. They had barely reached the entrance when a particularly large section gave way directly above their path. Mira saw it first. With strength born of desperation, she shoved Ben forward out of the stone's path. He stumbled through the tunnel entrance, tumbling to safety just as the massive rock sealed the opening behind him, sealing Mira inside. "No!" Ben scrambled to his feet, clawing at the blockage. "Mira!" Silence answered him. The stone was too massive to move, the gap too tightly sealed for sound to penetrate. The tunnel itself was becoming increasingly unstable, small stones continuing to rain down as the mountain shuddered. Ben pressed his forehead against the cool stone, anguish tearing through him. He had to get out. The rational part of his mind knew that, but leaving felt like betrayal. A sound behind him, footsteps approaching rapidly. Ben turned, expecting more mercenaries, ready to fight despite his exhaustion. Instead, he found 3 of Mira's warriors, their faces grim in the dim emergency lighting of the tunnel. "Where is she?" one demanded, taking in the collapsed entrance with growing alarm. "Trapped," Ben replied, voice breaking on the word. "She saved me." The warriors exchanged glances, then the apparent leader nodded sharply. "There is another way. An older path, less stable. We might reach her." Hope flared in Ben's chest. "Show me." They led him deeper into the tunnel system, taking branches that grew progressively narrower and rougher. These were ancient passages, worn by water rather than carved by hands. They crawled through spaces barely wide enough for their shoulders, squirmed under hanging stone that threatened to drop at the slightest touch. The mountain continued to rumble around them, but more distantly now. The mercenaries had either ceased their bombardment or moved to a different location. Either way, time was running out. Finally, they reached a crack in the stone that opened into the source cavern from the opposite side. Ben squeezed through first, ignoring the sharp edges that tore at his clothing and skin. The cavern was almost unrecognizable. Most of the ceiling had collapsed, crushing the source pool beneath tons of rock. Dust hung thick in the air, illuminated by shafts of daylight streaming through newly created holes far above. "Mira!" Ben called, scanning the devastation desperately. "Mira, answer me." Movement caught his eye. A flash of blue skin amidst the gray stone near where the pool had been. He scrambled over the rubble, heart in his throat. She lay half buried under smaller rocks, one arm outstretched toward what remained of the source. A small puddle of still glowing water in a depression between fallen boulders. Blood matted her white hair, and her breathing came in shallow, irregular gasps. "I found her!" Ben shouted to the warriors still making their way into the cavern. "Help me get these rocks off." Together, they freed her from the debris. Ben's medical training took over, his hands moving automatically to assess her injuries. Multiple fractures, internal bleeding, severe concussion. The list grew longer with each passing moment. Without proper equipment, without a hospital, "The source," Mira whispered, her voice barely audible. "Is it gone?" Ben glanced at the pitiful remnant of the once magnificent pool. "Almost. You succeeded." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Good. They cannot take what is not there." "Don't talk," Ben urged, applying pressure to a particularly nasty wound on her leg. "Save your strength." Her eyes clouded with pain, but still alert, fixed on his face. "You know, I am dying." "No," Ben refused to accept it. "I can stabilize you. Get you out of here. My team will have medical facilities." "Ben." His name on her lips stopped him cold. It was the first time she had called him by name instead of off-worlder or healer. "It is too late. For your medicine. She was right. He knew she was right. The injuries were too severe, too numerous. Even with the best equipment, the chances would be slim. His gaze drifted to the remains of the source, still glowing faintly amidst the rubble. No, Mira read his thought. Do not even think it. It could save you, Ben argued, desperate now. One more time. And how many would die to pay that debt? She countered, each word clearly costing her tremendous effort. The balance must be maintained. Damn the balance, Ben's voice broke. Damn the debt. I'm not losing you to some archaic belief about cosmic bookkeeping. Mira's laugh was a painful wheeze. You still don't understand. Her hand, cold and trembling, found his. The source is life and death together. You cannot separate them. The warriors watched silently, making no move to interfere. This was between the off-worlder and their leader, a clash of beliefs more fundamental than any physical battle. There must be another way, Ben insisted, though hope was fading with each labored breath Mira took. Something we haven't tried. There is, Mira whispered. With tremendous effort, she reached toward her belt, extracting a small vial that hung there, a container he recognized from his own medical supplies. She must have taken it from his kit days ago. Inside was a sample of the source water, collected before its destruction. For your people, she said, pressing it into his hand, for science, not to make weapons, but to heal, as you taught me. Ben stared at the vial, understanding dawning. You planned this. You knew the mountain might fall. I hoped it would not come to this. Her breathing grew more labored. But I prepared, just in case. Mira, Ben began, but she cut him off with a slight pressure from her fingers. Promise me, she insisted. Promise you will use it to teach them a better way. Balance, without sacrifice. The weight of her request settled on his shoulders. This tiny sample of the source, possibly the last in existence, represented both incredible potential and terrible danger. In the wrong hands, it could lead to exploitation, to commodified healing at the cost of other lives. In the right hands, I promise, he said finally, closing his fingers around the vial. No more debts, no more prices for healing. Satisfaction flickered in her eyes. Good. Her gaze shifted to the warriors who had accompanied Ben. Tell the clan, the source is gone. The mountain has taken it back. Now we must find a new way. The warriors bowed their heads in acknowledgement. Grief and respect mingled in their expressions. And you, Mira turned back to Ben, her voice fading. You are free of your debt, as am I. Mira, please, Ben begged, though he knew it was futile. Just hold on a little longer. Her smile was surprisingly gentle. I held on long enough. Her fingers tightened briefly around his. To show you our way, to learn yours, to find a better path between. The cavern fell silent except for the settling of stone and the soft whisper of Mira's increasingly shallow breaths. Ben held her hand, medical training and human compassion warring within him. He could do nothing to save her, but he could ensure she didn't die alone. Your people will need you, Mira murmured, her eyes beginning to lose focus. When the raiders return, when your team comes looking, they will need a bridge. I'll stay, Ben promised, as long as they need me. Not as a debtor, she insisted, as a healer, as yourself, as both, Ben replied softly. That's the balance, isn't it? Finding who we truly are between what others need and what we can give. A last smile touched Mira's lips. You understand. After all, her hand went slack in his. Her chest rose once more, then stilled. The warriors began a low, keening chant that echoed through the ruined cavern. Not a prayer, Ben realized, but a farewell. He remained kneeling beside her body, the vial of source water clutched in his hand. Grief threatened to overwhelm him, but something else rose to meet it. Resolve, determination, purpose. Mira had died to protect her people's future, to give them a chance to find a new path forward, one not dependent on the source and its terrible bargain. He wouldn't let that sacrifice be in vain. The mountain continued to settle around them, but the violent tremors had ceased. The The mercenaries had either given up or been called away, perhaps believing the natives were all dead, perhaps deciding the operation was no longer worth the risk. It didn't matter. What mattered was what came next. Ben carefully tucked the vial into an inner pocket of his uniform, then gathered Mira's body in his arms. The warriors made no move to stop him as he carried her toward the crack they had entered through. "We need to get her back to the settlement," he said quietly. "Her people should bury her with honor." One warrior stepped forward. "And then," Ben met his gaze steadily, "and then we rebuild. We find a new way to heal, one that doesn't demand blood for blood." "Without the source," the warrior began, doubt evident in his voice. "Without the source, you'll have to rely on medicine, on science." Ben finished for him. "It's slower, it's harder, but it doesn't require sacrifice." The warrior studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You will teach us." "I will," Ben promised, "for as long as it takes." They made their way back through the narrow passages, Ben cradling Mira's body with careful reverence. By the time they emerged into open air, night had fallen. The settlement lay in partial ruins from the mercenaries' attack, but people moved among the wreckage, already beginning to repair what could be salvaged. Word spread quickly. The source was gone. Mira was dead. The off-worlder carried her body with tender care. Villagers gathered, their expressions a mixture of grief, fear, and uncertainty. The elders approached, their faces grave in the flickering light of hastily lit torches. "Is it true?" one asked. "The source is destroyed?" "Yes," Ben answered simply. "Mira gave her life to prevent it falling into the wrong hands." Murmurs spread through the gathered crowd. Without the source, how would they heal their sick? How would they survive the raiders' attacks, the harsh seasons, the unknown diseases that periodically swept through their population? "But she left us a new path," Ben continued, raising his voice to be heard over the growing unrest. "She believed we could find balance without sacrifice. That healing doesn't have to come at the cost of other lives." "Pretty word," an elder scoffed, "but words don't close wounds or mend bones." "No," Ben agreed. "That takes knowledge, skill, time." He gently laid Mira's body on a flat stone that served as a communal table. "All of which I'm offering you." The crowd fell silent, weighing his words. The white bandage still wrapped around Mira's hand stood out starkly against her blue skin, a symbol of the bridge she had tried to build between their worlds. "Why would you help us?" another elder demanded. "You are free of your debt. The source that bound you is gone." Ben touched the pocket containing the vial of source water. "Because Mira was right. Balance must be maintained, not through death for life, but through knowledge freely given, through healing that comes from skill rather than sacrifice." He looked out at the gathered faces, seeing doubt, hope, fear, all the complex emotions of a people facing fundamental change. "I can't promise it will be easy," he said honestly. "Medicine isn't magic. It takes time to learn, time to work. People will still die, but fewer if we do this right. And no one will have to surrender their life to save another." A child pushed through the crowd, one of the first Ben had treated when the plague struck the settlement. She approached Mira's body without fear, placing a small violet flower on the warrior's chest. "She saved us," the child said simply. "Now you will save us again." Something shifted in the atmosphere. The tension didn't disappear, but it transformed into something else. A cautious willingness to listen, to consider. One of the warriors who had accompanied Ben into the cavern stepped forward. "I have seen the off-worlder fight," he announced, "not just with weapons but with knowledge, with healing hands. He fought for Mira until the end. He carries her body with honor." The warrior looked around at his people. "I will learn his way." Others joined him, some hesitantly, some with growing conviction. Not all. Some turned away, retreating to their dwellings, unwilling to abandon generations of tradition. But enough remained, enough to begin. The elders conferred briefly, then the oldest among them approached Ben. "You may stay," she pronounced. "You may teach those who wish to learn. But know this, if your way fails, if our people suffer because the source is gone, the debt will be yours to pay." "I understand," Ben replied solemnly, "and I accept." The funeral came at dawn. They carried Mira's body to a high ledge overlooking the violet forest. Ben watched as they performed rituals he didn't understand, speaking words in their native language that carried both grief and celebration. When it was over, When Mira's body had been returned to the mountain she died protecting, Ben stood alone at the edge of the cliff. The vial of source water seemed to pulse against his chest, a constant reminder of his promise. One sample, one chance to understand the impossible healing properties without the terrible cost the natives had accepted for generations. One opportunity to find balance between science and survival. "I'll find a way," he whispered to the wind, to Mira's spirit, to himself. "A path between your world and mine. No more debts, no more sacrifice." Below in the settlement, people were already gathering in the communal space. Some carried injuries from the mercenaries' attack. Others brought questions, doubts, hopes. All waited for him, not as a debtor, but as a healer, as a bridge. Ben took one last look at the horizon, where the first glimmers of sunlight painted the violet forest with gold. Then he turned and began the descent back to the settlement, back to the people who needed him, back to the balance Mira had died to create.